Well, good afternoon to you. It is 4:06 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up on the program, we'll have Emily Jashinsky join us at 5 o'clock. And then at 5:30, Ian Pryor from America First Legal, as Loudoun County families fight back against their tyrannical school board who's trying to trample their free speech rights. And they're fighting back in a big way. Ian's going to talk to us about that. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL.
But where we are right now is there increasing problems to the Democratic Party. You saw it in the punditry from Democrats last night on CNN after the town hall. You saw it on morning television, where Democratic pundits trying to be poker-faced are clearly feeling what a lot of Democratic donors are feeling and Democratic elected officials are feeling, which is there's no time left for her to get better. And I think the biggest story of the news cycle is, along with Trump loves Hitler, which we'll talk about, is her performance last night was the last straw for a lot of Democrats.
That's Mark Halperin this week saying that, Kamala's struggling and Democrats are panicking about it. For more on this subject, I want to bring in Ed Morrissey now. He's a managing editor over at Hot Air and the author of Going Red, God willing. Ed, good to talk to you today, sir.
It's great to be on with you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so the left's panic, how real do you think that is?
I think it's pretty real, and I think it's reflected in this whole Donald Trump is Hitler reborn messaging that is now going from the candidate all the way down. I mean, that's the type of thing that you used to farm out to your PR people and to House members and columnists that are, friendly to your cause. You'd have them do that, and you'd be going, well, tut, 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 let us not exaggerate now. He might not be Hitler. He's more like, Mussolini, right, or something like that.
Right.
But I think that they're just in the last 48 hours, they are just overwhelmingly trying to push this message. This is supposedly going to be Kamala Harris's closing argument on the at the Ellipse on the Mall on Tuesday, a full week ahead of actual election day, which I think is very odd. And I think it really is they're trying to rally the base. I think that they're finding that their base is unenthusiastic. Their own voters are not enthusiastic, and they're not even trying to go for the center now. They're just trying to get their own voters to show up. And I think if you're looking at some of the data from early voting, there may be some reason that they're starting to panic about whether or not their voters are going to show up.
On this talking point issue of everyone's Trump is Hitler and he's exactly like Hitler and his supporters are like Nazis. Here's Hillary Clinton last night on CNN.
And one other thing that you'll see next week, Caitlin, is Trump actually reenacting the Madison Square Garden rally in 1939. I write about this in my book. President Franklin Roosevelt was appalled that neo-Nazis, fascists in America were lining up to essentially pledge their support for the kind of government that they were seeing in Germany.
Two things jump to mind. One is what Chris Plant said this morning on our air, which is like how ahistoric this is. They weren't neo-Nazis at the time. They were just Nazis at the time back in 1939. Right. And then the other piece here is that her husband literally held his convention in 1992 at Madison Square Garden. So what was that rally, Ed Morrissey?
I don't know. Both parties have had their conventions at Madison Square Garden since then. I think several times, right? If you're going to go from from that point forward, I was at the Republican one in 2004. I don't know if they'd had one prior to that at Madison Square Garden.
Are you telling me that every Knicks game is actually a Nazi rally?
Well, I guess if you're a Nets fan, maybe. I don't No, of course not. It's silly. This is the silliest argument. It's not as though he's going over to Germany to hold a rally. You know who actually did that as part of a presidential election cycle? Barack Obama. Barack Obama actually went to Germany I don't think it was in Nuremberg. I don't want to say it was in Nuremberg, but he actually went to Germany to do a rally in Germany during the 2008 campaign. And I mean, I certainly wouldn't have called him a fascist for that.
Unbelievable.
It was a bizarre thing to do if you're running for president in America, to go
Yes.
to Germany to hold a rally. But he was trying to, of course, impress upon people how beloved he would be as an American leader worldwide.
You know, Ed, one of the things that I'm observing, and you've been observing this longer than I have, politics and how it works and what's effective. You know, I don't get her campaign in terms of its strategy. So the last few weeks, she's been campaigning with Liz Cheney. She's now flailing about saying that Trump is Hitler. She's incapable of doing an interview. She tries to do softball interviews. She steps on rakes. She tries to do tougher interviews with Bret Baier. She steps on rakes. And now in this final week, she's going to do some sort of January 6th theater, and she's going to have Bruce Springsteen doing concerts for her. I don't understand how any of this is an effective political campaign.
Well, I mean, and today she's in Texas, right? She's in Houston. Now, I live in Texas. It's not a battleground state. And I don't know why she's in Houston with 10 days left to go. I don't know why she's doing a closing argument with 6 days left to go. 6 campaign days left to go before the election. I mean, none of that makes a lot of sense unless they're trying to get her out of the battleground states so they can send better surrogates in there to try to make the pitch. I mean, she said that she's in Texas because it's the tip of the spear for the abortion issue, which is not even in the top 4 issues facing voters at this point. I mean, they want to make that an issue, but
yeah,
that's not where voters are at. She's not talking to voters where they're at. She's lecturing voters as to where she wants to be at. And it just doesn't make any sense at all to me.
The Houston thing is interesting, and this is just I have a working theory on why they picked Houston. They announced on Monday that they'd be going to Houston on Friday. The Atlantic came out with its piece, Jeffrey Goldberg did, on Tuesday, and the centerpiece of that was the lead, which is that Vanessa Guillen, the Army soldier who was brutally murdered in Texas, her hometown is Houston. And I was kind of the impression, this is an inside job. This is like Lauren Powell Jobs, who owns the Atlantic, working with Kamala, trying to salvage the campaign. We're going to give you a great story for Houston. It turns out the whole family, Vanessa Guillen's family, they're supporting Trump and say that the story's garbage. So that whole thing's imploded. But you mentioned that maybe they're trying to keep her out of the swing states and send in better surrogates. But I don't know if they have better surrogates. Bill Clinton was in Arizona this week. And he said the following. Take a listen to this.
I mean, she was there as vice president, and what they think of her largely depends on what they think of President Biden.
Oh, boy.
But she is extremely vulnerable, more vulnerable than she deserves to be.
And then he went on to say, Carrie Lake is kind of hot. Listen to Bill Clinton.
Running against someone who is physically attractive but believes that politics is a performance art.
Oh, my gosh. What kind of surrogates are these, Ed?
Well, yeah, I think maybe Bill Clinton thinks he's in the surrogate business of a different nature altogether. The less said about that, the better, Vince. The less said about that, the better. I think Barack Obama is what I mean. They're going to send Barack Obama to Pennsylvania, Michigan. They sent Hillary Clinton to Michigan for, I don't know what they were thinking with that. She's the one who lost to him in the first place. But I think this whole Trump is a fascist finale thing is really indicative that they're desperate and they're trying to find ways to shore up their own base because nobody has any enthusiasm for this candidacy.
And the truth is, it's a vile attack. It's a very vile attack, and it's the kind of attack that forms the basis for mentally ill people to take them up on the gambit that he is like a Hitler figure. And we saw, the second Trump assassin, the would-be assassin, was crystal clear that he said democracy is on the ballot. He said on social media he was a big Biden-Harris supporter. He was hiding in the bushes, attempting to kill Trump because he thought it would save the country. They're breathing life into that kind of mental illness when they say things like this. That's one. And the other piece is, are you actually going to move votes with this garbage? Because they've been riding the January 6th insurrection thing for going on 3.5 years, and Trump has never been more popular than he is now, Ed Morrissey.
Yeah, I mean, do we think that that hasn't been litigated? I mean, like literally litigated
Yes.
over and over and over again for the last 3 years. Um, I think that this is one of those. I've been trying to find a good analogy for this, Vince, and this is the one that I think that I'm just going to keep landing on. When people are talking to, when people are speaking to other people who don't share the same language, and this is probably true mostly of American English speakers, is that you're talking to somebody, you realize that they don't speak English, and then because you really want to make sure that they understand you, you just start yelling.
Yeah.
I said, "How do you do?" Because that works. I think that's the analogy that I have to land on with this, is that they've been using this messaging, and it's not just the last 3 months. They've been doing this for 2 years. Ever since they found out that Trump was going to run for another term of office, they've been running this disqualification strategy against them, and it's not working. It's not even really advancing the ball at all anymore. And to a certain extent, I think it's backfiring. And rather than recognize that, they think that the solution is just to say it louder and more often. And it's really bad now.
Yes, but it'd be one thing if they had some sort of facts to support them, and they were like, "Man, our message really isn't getting through. Perhaps we should shout it louder." Instead, what we're getting is Mika Brzezinski goes on her morning show and says that Donald Trump is going to use the military to kill American citizens, that women are dying, we're all going to be thrown in camps. The View is claiming that Donald Trump is going to bomb their studio. And like, we're hearing the most ludicrous possible hysterics coming out of the left right now. And I guess the upshot is that there's plenty of Americans who are laughing at that, saying that's ridiculous, but they're not making a real case, Ed.
No, they're shrieking. They're shrieking it, and they're shrieking over and over again. They're not making a real case, and they're just saying if you support them, then you're a fascist too. I mean, this is nonsense stuff. This is sheer demagoguery. It doesn't have any connection to reality. This is a guy who was actually president for 4 years.
Yeah.
Right. And people understand what it's going to be like to put him in office again for another 4 years. There'll be a bunch of stupid tweets and policies that they like. And, and apparently they didn't like the stupid tweets in 2020, but maybe 2024, they're thinking, I'll take the stupid tweets I'll take the stupid tweets for 200, Alex. I mean, it's disconnected from reality, and the more that they keep pursuing this, the more that they look disconnected from reality.
Right.
The more that they look like the problem.
Yeah, people want their lives back, and they liked their lives better when Trump was president. Lastly, on the data front, because I know you follow this, Ed, what are you looking for? What's the thing what are the indicators that you're looking at that as we go into Election Day? A lot is being said about the early vote. It does seem like it's going well for Republicans. The polls, and the New York Times coming out with this survey today saying that in the popular vote, it's a dead heat, 48-48, which usually redounds to the benefit of the Republican with the Electoral College. What are you staring at?
Well, I mean, I'm looking at the polls, obviously, and the early vote. I mean, there's some really good indications from the early vote. Nevada is looking surprisingly good for Republicans in the early vote. And I'm looking at John Ralston, who is absolutely the best at analysis for Nevada elections. And so whatever John Ralston is taking away from that, I pretty much trust his takeaway. But I'm looking at the polls too, and I'm looking at the battleground polls more than the national polls. But the national polls are interesting. You had not just one, but two major polls that came out today that are not normally friendly to Republicans that show the national vote at a dead heat tie. New York Times, CNN, it was the first one. That was this morning. But CNN dropped a poll later in the day showing that it's a tie at 47-47. And needless to say, if you're tying in the national vote, because of the structure of the Electoral College, that is very bad news for Democrats. That if the final iteration of all these polls is that Trump has gotten into a tie with Kamala Harris from, I don't remember what the last CNN poll showed. I guess I can try to look it up here while we're talking. It was Harris +1 6 weeks ago or 5 weeks ago.
Yeah.
That's momentum. So voters are moving in Trump's direction in national polling. Usually these media polls use sample structures that overload on Democrats anyway. But even if it's a tie nationally, that means that all that support that comes on the coasts is on one side, and the stuff in the middle of the country is another. And that is a recipe for an electoral college loss for Democrats. They cannot win an election if there really is a straight up tie in the national polling. They just can't do it.
All right. Well, we'll keep tracking it. 11 days to go. I can't even believe we're this close. Ed Morrissey from Hot Air. A great website, great guy. Thank you, Ed. Good to talk to you today.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me on today.
All right, let's go to the phones. Frank is calling in from Annandale now on line one. Hello, Frank. You're on the Vince Gallinay Show.
Hey, Vince. So last Tuesday, I called in when you were talking about the Atlantic scandal, and I did a little bit more research in that. And when I mentioned a child sex scandal article that the Atlantic put out to try to debunk the fact that there was child sex trafficking and things like that, and it was all QAnon. The timing of that article, so that came out in January of 2022. And if you think back around that time, guess who was on trial in New York for that exact thing? Ghislaine Maxwell. So it's super interesting to me that the timing of these Atlantic articles is just beyond the pale.
It was January of 2022 that the Atlantic ran this piece?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. You don't have the title for it in front of you, do you?
I do. It's called The Great Fake Child Sex Trafficking Epidemic by Caitlin Tiffany.
Okay, The Great
December
Fake...
9th, 2021.
Okay. So, in other words, it was at the very same moment that Ghislaine Maxwell was in court in New York for being a part of a child sex ring.
Exactly.
Unbelievable. I mean, actually, totally believable, but still appalling. That's the thing. Yeah, it's not shocking, but appalling is typically how I assess most of these things these days. Thank you, Frank. That's a useful piece of information. And Lauren Powell Jobs, the owner of The Atlantic, is all in on Kamala Harris. I was going over the details yesterday. All of Epstein's pals seem desperate to get Kamala Harris elected. Why is that? Why are they so interested in that? The world may never know. Or maybe they will if Trump gets elected. Stay with us. Coming up, Emily Jashinsky's going to be here. Also, Joe Biden traveled west today. He went to Indian country, and he lost his mind. Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 4:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Emily Jashinsky will join us at 5 o'clock. At 5:30, Ian Pryor from America First Legal. We talked to him about chaos in Loudoun County as the First Amendment is under assault there by the school board. And we'll talk to you at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Joe Biden was sent away from Washington today. He visited Indian country on the outskirts of Metro Phoenix in Arizona. It's a swing state. He's gonna provide a boost to Kamala Harris's campaign, the Associated Press says. President Joe Biden used his long-promised first presidential visit to Indian country to formally apologize to Native Americans on Friday for a government-run boarding school system that for decades forcibly separated Indian children from their parents 150 years ago. Democrats hope Biden's visit to the Gila River Indian communities land on the outskirts of Metro Phoenix in Arizona will also provide a boost to Vice President Kamala Harris. Unlikely, given that he's even more unpopular than she is. He had promised tribal leaders nearly 2 years ago that he would make the visit to Indian country. This speech today, if you can even call it that, this mumble, was a disaster. It was an unmitigated, on-brand disaster. Here is Joe Biden. Tom Elliott shares this clip with us today over the course of 31 seconds, attempting to make any coherent sense.
By the way, the infrastructure bill is over $1 trillion. It's not a decade. I mean, it's just not a quarter. It's going to be there for a decade. much, much more to come, and you've got to get your fair share. By authorizing the Violence Against Women Act, an act that I took great pains in writing 30 years ago, we also reaffirmed tribal sovereignty, expanded tribal jurisdiction in cases where outside predators harm members of your nation.
You know, the upshot for a speech like this is the scriptwriters don't have to do anything. Like the speechwriters, they literally don't have to write anything. They could just put colors or scribbles on the screen or nothing, literally nothing. Just sleep in. Don't worry about writing a speech. It's not like anyone's going to understand him anyway. He'll just start, just push him out there, let him start babbling, and then everyone politely applauds and he walks off stage eventually. So that's Biden today. Incomprehensible over the course of 31 entire seconds. What else did he do today? Oh, he had a moment where he was acknowledging Senator Mark Kelly in the crowd. And he tried to say that he was once friends with Gabby Giffords because President Biden is under the impression that she's not alive, apparently. Gabby Giffords is alive, just to be really clear. Biden, his brain, not so much.
Thank you to Senator Mark Kelly, a great friend who also was married to an incredible woman who was my friend. Please have a seat, by the way.
Thank you to Senator Mark Kelly, a great friend who also was married. I'm sorry, he is still married to an incredible woman who was my friend. She's alive, Joe. She's alive. This is like the Jackie Walorski thing. Remember, where's Jackie? Where's Jackie's looking around the room. He had written just weeks prior, the White House had released a statement in his name commemorating her life. She was dead. And he was looking around the room for Congresswoman Jackie Walorski, who, of course, was not there to react. So that's President Biden today. Does Kamala Harris have any capable surrogates? Any of them? Biden can't put sentences together. Biden thinks that people who are dead are alive, or people who are alive are actually dead. Bill Clinton is out there ogling Carrie Lake and saying she's a real hottie. Saying she's very physically attractive. He says Kamala's vulnerable in this campaign. She's not doing well. Bill Clinton announced in Georgia that Lake and Riley would still be alive were it not for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris failing to vet her killer, who they released into the country. Barack Obama hits the campaign trail and tells black men it's their fault that Kamala's not doing better. What a great campaign. What a completely awesome campaign. So that's what's going on with the campaign. And the left, oh my gosh. The View is upset about it all. Nicholas Fondacaro over at Newsbusters, the Media Research Center, had this clip today.
That's what we need to be talking about.
Not enough networks are doing it. That's the bottom line.
I volunteer. I do it too.
He has gotten a break. I'm sorry. He has gotten a break because of his rhetoric, because of all the crazy stuff that he says. He just recently said something. Do we have that tape?
Yes, let's see the tape.
Yeah,
the media has been so worn down, I think, by Trump's crazy talk that they treat his rants as if he's normal.
Yeah. So the View is holding today. They're angry that Kamala is losing. So their position is that the media have been too nice to Trump. They've been too generous with Trump. Trump is just getting the kid glove treatment. The guy who's accused of being Hitler every day by the press, getting the kid glove treatment. So crazy. And then they hold Kamala to a child's standards. That's the View and everybody else. They're like, she's great. Oh, don't ask her for details. Don't expect her to be an adult who's running for president of the United States. You know Kevin O'Leary, Mr. Wonderful from Shark Tank? Remember that guy? Pretty successful businessman in his own right. He was on CNN this week, and he was pointing out that Kamala Harris is such a disastrous candidate. And he made an analogy. He was talking about how, most money managers, they can't beat the S&P 500. If they try and pick individual stocks and think they can win. He said, I think the number is 88% of them can't actually beat just the basic index funds. And he says, kind of like what the Democrats did with Kamala. They just picked her and they said, well, maybe she'll succeed, rather than let there be some sort of democratic process for replacing her. The CNN panel went bonkers.
I would like to introduce the concept of the panel tonight. It's going to be a short dissertation, but I want you to think about this because I watched like you did yesterday, and something hit me pretty hard. Only 90 days ago, Pelosi went to Biden and said, you need to step aside, and convinced him to do so. He made the decision, and he did actually ask her, and we've now learned this, is she the right person to drive this home? He questioned that. He could have said, we need to run a process in order for me to make this move, but they decided not to. I don't know who they is. Was it Obama? Was it Pelosi? I don't care who it was. In stock picking, just listen to this analogy, and you may agree, you may not. 88% of managers, because this is the world I live in, cannot beat the S&P year in, year out. So you give them $1,000, the S&P beats them. They can't pick stocks. This is the second time the Democratic Party has circumvented democracy and chose.
That's not true.
Yes, it is. Hillary Clinton was chosen.
Well, let me make a correction to what he just said. It's at least the third time in a row that they've done this. Joe Biden was not doing well in the primary back in 2020. It was Barack Obama who rescued him. He called all of these other candidates and said, it is time for you to get out of the race. And they all obeyed. They all complied. They jumped out of the race. And that was designed to stop Bernie Sanders from coalescing enough support to win the primary. So they had to rally behind an establishment candidate, Joe Biden, in 2020. So every single time the Democrat primary is conducted, this is how they do it. They rig it against their own voters. They don't really want their primary voters to dictate who their nominee is going to be. So Kevin O'Leary's right about this, but he's wrong about the number of times this has occurred.
Democracy and chose.
That's not true.
Yes, it is. Hillary Clinton was chosen, and she had Bruce Springsteen too. And what happened to her? And now we've chosen.
Kevin, Hillary Clinton won a primary. Okay, she won a primary. You may not.
Nobody could compete with her, even Bernie Sanders.
She won a primary.
They rigged it. You remember Debbie Wasserman Schultz was fired on the first day of the Democrat convention because all the evidence was coming out that they had rigged the process. Do you remember that? That was the first day of the convention in 2016. Debbie Wasserman Schultz was the DNC chairwoman. She was fired on the first day. They had to get rid of her because all of the details were coming out about the way that this whole thing was rigged for Hillary Clinton against Bernie Sanders.
First of all, that's the first
thing. So
thing.
did Kamala Harris win a primary?
Listen, we've talked about this before.
What's wrong about talking about it tonight after what you just saw?
Do you think that's really what matters to voters?
Right now.
How many Democrats wish?
Your whole shtick has been,
hang on a second.
let's talk about what matters to voters. Do you really think voters care about the internecine primary process?
If you're a Democrat, you sure as hell care today.
Who is that? Is that the Washington Post lady? Do we know? Okay. Well, I'll just keep playing.
I know that you are from Canada, but the primary process.
That's why I'm perfect for this.
I
have no skin.
You love that? So now they're saying you don't understand how this works. You're Canadian. You can't understand this. Now, first of all, Kevin O'Leary, I'm pretty sure, is smarter than everyone on the panel with him. He could run circles around all of them, and they're just screaming out, "That's not true. That's not true." Everything he said was true. It was true.
Care about the internecine primary process.
If you're a Democrat, you sure as hell care today.
I know that you are from Canada, but the primary process.
That's why I'm perfect for this. I have no skin in the game other than to get a great president.
It's not in the Constitution. The political parties can choose however they want to choose their nominee.
They can rig it any way they want, and Democrat voters have to suffer the consequences.
Right.
And as long as they meet the legal deadlines in the states where they are on the ballot, they can do it however they want. They can decide.
He's not making a legal argument. You see, that's a logical fallacy that she's engaged in. He's not making a legal argument. That's what they're doing is illegal. He said it's anti-democratic. That's true. They were disinterested in what the voters wanted. They wanted to leave them out of the process, so they did. It's not a matter of can they legally do it. Yes, of course they can. They did it in a brazen way. They stuffed it in the faces of the people who claim to be proud Democrats. So the CNN host lady is saying, well, wait, it's not unconstitutional. What standard are you talking about? That's not even... in the conversation.
I have no skin in the game other than to get a great president.
It's not in the Constitution. The political parties can choose however they want to choose their nominee.
Right.
And as long as they meet the legal deadlines in the states where they are on the ballot, they can do it however they want.
I just want to be transparent. Yes, I was born in Canada,
in December 2023 to just handpick somebody.
Just to be transparent, I was born in Canada.
It's a Democratic Party process, not a Democrat.
You listen, they're not even letting him talk. That's not a thing. It's not a thing. It's he's trying to say one thing.
No, but my kids were born and raised in Boston. All my investments in the United States. I want the president, whoever it is, to be a winner.
You're describing something as undemocratic that has absolutely nothing to do with the democratic process.
Does that lady pretend to be an objective host on CNN? Is that the? I don't know what her deal is. I don't watch her show. All I see is clips of Ryan Gerdusky like dunking on everybody, and then Kevin O'Leary going on there. She's like, "That doesn't have to be democratic. We don't need democracy around here." Okay. So Kevin O'Leary, correct. I thought he was going to say, "Yes, I was born in Canada, but I wasn't born yesterday." I thought that was what he was going to say. That would have been a good line. So there you go. In case you're wondering what's happening with the presidency and the election, the Washington Post today has announced, to great consternation, they are not going to be endorsing anybody. No endorsement. For the first time since, I think, 1988, they have decided to not endorse at all. Not endorse at all. They're sitting it out. They're sitting it out. Until 1976, the Washington Post didn't regularly make endorsements in presidential elections. After that, they regularly made endorsements in presidential elections. And for the first time since the 1980s, the Washington Post is not going to endorse anybody. The announcement says the Washington Post will not be making an endorsement of a presidential candidate in this election, nor in any future presidential election. They've decided to give it up entirely. We're returning to our roots of not endorsing presidential candidates. Now, remember what the Washington Post has been saying to us. They're on board with Kamala Harris's talking points. Trump is a fascist. He's like Hitler, blah, blah, blah. Oh, so you're not taking up a position in this race? You can't endorse against Hitler? Well, you know, just let the voters decide. Yeah, but Hitler, we're not endorsing. Now, there's a reason. There's an obvious reason for this. Jeff Bezos, who owns the Washington Post, is of the opinion that Donald Trump is either likely or certain to win. That's why he's arrived here. Now, they're not going to go so far as endorsing Trump. They're not going to do that. But Bezos is very, very dependent on the United States federal government, your federal government, your tax dollars, for an immense amount of money. And I'm not talking about for Amazon Prime subscriptions. I'm talking about their Amazon Web Services, their cloud services. Amazon is a major federal contractor. They have a lot of money riding on this. And the last thing in the world that Bezos wants to do in the waning days of the election is to alienate Trump. Now, of course, you could point to, like, well, this is going to be the thing that makes Trump like him? Like, no, I don't think so. I mean, the Washington Post has been completely out of control. And I think Trump has no shortage of mockery to direct at them. But Bezos has become so certain that it looks like Trump is going to win this thing. He doesn't even want to endorse Kamala. No, we can't do this. In fact, I'm going to banish all presidential endorsements forever, they say. Now, that could be a lie, too. They could bring back endorsements. But right now they say they're not going to be doing it in, quote, any future presidential election. And the staff at the Washington Post are freaking out because in the end, they're political activists, not journalists. And today, there's a bunch of people. Brian Stelter tweets the following. A member of the Washington Post editorial department tells me Bezos' decision not to endorse is, quote, an outrageous abdication of responsibility. Democracy doesn't die in darkness. It dies when people anticipatorily consent to a fascist's whims. Yeah, leave it to a Washington Post editorial board member to use the phrase anticipatorily in their anonymous outrage about their boss's decision. The Guild at the Washington Post, that's the union, they say, we are deeply concerned that the Washington Post, an American news institution in the nation's capital, would make the decision to no longer endorse presidential candidates, especially a mere 11 days ahead of an immensely consequential election. The role of an editorial board is to do just this, to share opinions. The message from our chief executive, Will Lewis, not from the editorial board itself, makes us concerned that management interfered with the work of our members. According to our own reporters and Guild members, an endorsement for Harris was already drafted, and the decision to not publish was made by the Post's owner, Jeff Bezos. So here you have the employees of the Post blaming Bezos, saying he stopped it. He stopped it. And this is putting some of those Washington Post employees in a very uncomfortable and hilarious position right now. The Washington Post, not alone. Earlier this week, the LA Times also refused to make an endorsement in the presidential race. A Washington Post blogger called Jen Rubin was applauding an LA Times columnist who quit their job over it. Bravo, all respect. Where are the rest of them, she asked. Today, her paper has not endorsed. Is Jen Rubin going to quit her job? Where is she? She's gone quiet. We'll give you updates if they come. Coming up next, Emily Jashinsky is here.